Hi, well, welcome. My name is Shazaer Yusuf. I'm a mechanical engineer here at Boeing, working in the Boeing Additive Manufacturing Group. I'm a simulation specialist, but I'm also the chair of BAPA El Segundo, which is the Boeing Asian Pacific Association. I'm here with Rachelle Radpour. She is Boeing's chief engineer for commercial satellite programs. So there have been many changes in the workplace since COVID-19 hit. Can you talk a little bit about how those changes have impacted your industry specifically?
Yeah, sure. So obviously, we're hitting the 2-year mark this week actually from when we shut down. I remember being in a conference room working an anomaly with my team, and we all found out March Madness was canceled, and then the next week we were all working from home.
Right.
But beyond that, there's been so many other changes personally for folks, how they've had to adjust the work-life balance, perhaps personal challenges that they've had in their lives with loved ones or distance from relatives.
Of course.
And then of course we've had the challenges and the pressures of working in a COVID environment. Not only did many of us have to relearn how to work and talk to each other over the rest of the world is Zoom. At Boeing we use WebEx. But not only did we have to learn how to work in a new virtual environment for most folks, then we started feeling the heave and the weight of the COVID impacts throughout the whole industry. So just like many people had a race for basic staples at the grocery store, many businesses and industries also have had an impact, and it continues to impact us today. The entire global supply chain has been impacted, and we deal with it just like everybody else does. You find ways to work around it, and you find ways to, we've talked to suppliers and actually ask them how are they dealing with the COVID, how are they dealing with changing pressures at work. And as everybody has adapted throughout the last 2 years, our teams, remembering that you're working with humans across the world has been the most important thing in order to get through this all.
Is there kind of a particular maybe achievement or milestone that you've hit during this time during COVID with this kind of transition that you're kind of particularly proud of or that you might want to talk about?
I am so proud, particularly of our teams here, just because that's what I can talk about. And the fact that, through it all, we've had people coming in to work while staying safe. We put a lot of controls in place. I myself, was part of a team for a good year and a half, coming into the office every day, wearing masks, cleaning, sanitizing. And there are some industries and environments where you have to come in. If you work in a factory, if you work in a special area, you're going to have to come in and figure out a way to still stay safe and get the job done. And our programs didn't stop. Our work didn't stop. And so I'm incredibly proud of the teams that were part of that, incredibly proud of the progress that we have made, and that extends all the way through. Our customers have been there through it all with us. Our suppliers have been there with us. And that's amazing.
I agree completely. It's really challenging to kind of be so adaptive in a completely foreign environment. I mean, there's been nothing like this that's happened anytime recently, so it's amazing that you guys have been able to keep up and keep driving towards that success.
And I will say another big change that we've seen, I think this is all throughout the world, it's not just Boeing. People, because they've been working virtually, have chosen to move away from city centers,
Right.
move out into different states and cities that are maybe less populated, and I think that's an interesting thing to think about from a satellite perspective because several years ago we all knew where the data was going to be. We all knew where to put the bandwidth. We all knew where to put our spot beams in our satellites. So if you think about a DirecTV satellite or any other internet satellite, we designed it specifically for a coverage where we knew people would be.
Right.
And as connectivity demand has increased, obviously, as I mentioned, with all the Zoom calls everybody's been taking, with all the family connections people have been desiring and needing and wanting, some people have found it very comforting to talk to their families a world away,
Right.
daily, weekly, where they didn't do that before, maybe, and now it's an increase because of the lack of that personal connection that we're getting in our lives.
Right.
So because of that, one of the things that I find really fascinating is the change from our operator perspective and satellite customer perspective, and how does Boeing then fill that gap?
Right.
So we have new payload technologies today that actually service that. We have flexible payloads. Our IPA, our 702X product line, allows for operators to adaptively shift the service and the coverage for where that connectivity is going to go. And so people who, not people, but the operators and service providers that are watching these models can say, oh, you know what, I'm seeing this shift and I need to put more bandwidth over here, and they can do that now with our satellites.
So Boeing has a long history of delivering satellites to the Asia-Pacific region. Can you talk a little bit about that history and what that means to the company?
Absolutely. Boeing Satellite Systems is an international company. We have customers all over the world and a strong presence in the Asia-Pacific region. We've had our JSAT, JCSAT, MEASAT, Superbird. I myself worked several of those campaigns and did the in-orbit testing for those campaigns from Japan or Malaysia. And,
Wow.
It really makes a difference when you provide that connectivity to regions that may not have the ability to lay fiber. And so just
Gotcha.
as I mentioned earlier, having that satellite connected service totally relevant in our, whether it was 10, 15 years ago where we just didn't have fiber and we wanted to be able to broadcast sports, TV, and what else. Now it's connectivity, and it's being able to connect people who may have moved away from
It's that
the region.
customizability as well.
Yeah,
Right.
and give people the service that they need in the areas that they need it. So not only do we have our long history of customers and service in the area, we also have our key suppliers in the region as well, and checking in with those folks and making sure that they've also weathered the pandemic and how we're going to keep working together, and that's all part of our connected future.
Is there been kind of a growth that we've seen recently in the Asia-Pacific region in the last 10 to 15 years, or is it kind of stayed with kind of our expectations with kind of the rest of the world in the way that it's been growing?
Growth and demand is booming.
Right.
Yeah, I think that there is certainly a demand in the Asia-Pacific region. It's continuing to grow, and the more we see this demand and need for connectivity across the world. I mean, didn't we just shoot or have most of the Olympics completely virtual?
Right.
How many correspondents actually were there?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's funny to think about that too from a perspective. I mean, in the last year, most kind of major broadcast events were largely virtual and covered by only a select very few amount of people. So having that kind of ability to serve that is pretty unique capability.
Right.
Yeah.
Increasing access,
Right.
We have increased demand, and so the more that you can increase the access to fill that demand, again, the more diversity and the more perspectives you bring to the table.
Mhm.
You don't want to just have the select few that have been covering the same events.
Sure. So we've been talking a lot about kind of connectivity and enhanced connectivity that Boeing's providing through our commercial satellite program. So I'm curious, what are some of the kind of new technologies or new capabilities that customers are using with that newfound kind of capability that Boeing's able to provide?
Right. So traditionally, a lot of people think about satellites, and if they kind of know what it's for, they think of satellite TV or
Right.
satellite radio. But nowadays we're also satellite internet, and of course, I mean, this has been around for a while. If you think about what are you doing when you get to the gas station? You run your credit card.
Mhm.
It pings to a tower, and eventually, whether we're 5G connected, there's a satellite in the loop at some point.
Right.
And so when you think about, again, the change in the world today, how many times can you go to a vendor stall at an open air market and now use your credit card there? That was not a thing, right?
Right.
10 years ago.
Right.
So the world, the reliance on connectivity, the good thing is we want to be, as satellite communications providers, just part of the background. We don't want people to know that that is part of the link, right? That is something that is supposed to be part of the backbone, supposed to be part of the working system.
Right.
So that people can, all they're doing is using their credit card, whether it's secure banking, whatever it is that's going on, they're getting connected and they're getting what they need.
How would you describe Boeing's commitment to diversity and inclusion, and what are some of the changes that you're seeing that are helping us move the needle to get to a more diverse, inclusive place at Boeing?
Great question. So Boeing is, of course, a company that's been around a long time in the aerospace industry. Traditionally, aerospace, as part of the STEM world, has been, a select industry, not, 30, 40 years ago, not quite as diverse as it is today.
Sure.
So we've seen a lot of changes, and it goes down to our hiring practices and how we promote diversity in the workforce and the workplace, making sure that it's an inclusive environment. And I've seen Boeing in particular make a lot of positive changes in that direction. There's still a lot of work to go. But if you compare us to a lot of the other companies in the industry, you can see year over year we're making these improvements. And we have several more women today in leadership than in the past. So 20 years ago, again, you wouldn't see as many executive female leaders, female managers in the organizations. And today, CEO of Boeing Defense is Leanne Corrett, and our Deputy General Manager for Space and Launch, Dr. Michelle Parker. So we have quite a few good role models and examples for others in the industry. And the more you can see yourself represented in your leadership, and see that other people, whether it's parents, male or female, blending their family, taking on, kind of that, blended family life. You can see yourself growing in a company, because that's often what oftentimes why maybe some females will leave the industry, is that they don't feel supported, they don't feel encouraged. They're not seeing a way for them to have a family and work and continue their career. And so, one of the positive things, for example, that I've seen is that we also offer paternity for fathers. So by encouraging both parents, you have maternity and paternity, by encouraging both parents to take time off, it's that shared burden. It shows not only that family unit that is in that situation, how they can grow as a family and still have a career. It shows others within the team, within the culture, how do we do this together?
Right.
So you support both the mom and the dad, you support everybody involved. It's not just a mom's burden anymore. I think that is a really big thing in terms of keeping women in the workforce, and in terms of kind of propagating more females out of school. That's all the way down into the younger education levels. So Boeing's a really big advocate of STEM, and that applies to boys and girls.
Right.
And so we have a lot of STEM-focused events out in the community, a lot of STEM and diversity events at schools, and you can see all the way through college and our hiring that we're really big on promoting those activities, and we hire quite a diverse workforce.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
In those, it sounded like you were talking about a lot of kind of like hiring pipelines that are being developed, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to kind of access boys and girls of all different kind of backgrounds. Are there any that you've been a part of in terms of setting up or kind of providing direction on?
Yeah, I mean, when I was in college, I was in SWE, and then that translated into SWE in the Workforce, Society of
Right.
Women Engineers,
Yeah.
as well as we have a Boeing Women in Leadership, BWIL. And I've also participated and supported our SHIP and our NSBE organizations. Those are just diversity in general.
Right.
And we used to do, I used to have my whole team volunteer. We used to have these events that were organized by Boeing, and we could go volunteer. And I know several times we went and did team volunteer events at a STEM workshop or supporting kids in different areas. So yeah, whenever we get a chance, we try to incorporate that as part of the Boeing culture, so that it's not only a fun team building thing, but also giving back to the community and making sure you're driving that messaging home and showing people that it's important to us.
Yeah, so to wrap up, I mean, Boeing is all about building the future. Can you tell us a little bit what the future looks like from a commercial satellite perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question. So, as I said, a lot of things have changed in the industry. We have seen a lot of changes just in satellite manufacturing alone, and how our customers will use our satellites, what they're looking for in our satellites. We're in a transition period in the satellite industry for sure. So people are thinking about, the size of their satellite, how many they're going to need, how long it's going to need to last, and whether they're a single player, if they're going to be part of a constellation. So as our customers' needs change, as our operators' needs are changing, Boeing also has not only platforms and payloads that will adapt and service these needs, will help them fill that future. So whether it's multi-orbit, whether it's constellation, whether it's single player, we're changing the way that we think about manufacturing. You yourself, part of our additive
Right.
manufacturing group, 3D printed satellites, whatever that means for the future, Boeing satellites and, how we're going to connect the world can continue to evolve.
Well, thank you so much, Rachelle. Really appreciate your time and for chatting with us today.
Absolutely.